Welcome all. We can see that we've got some attendees starting to trickle in now. I wanted to welcome you. Adam Nixon's my name. We'll do a round of introductions shortly. As we're waiting for people to trickle in, we're going to commence the presentation and the official part of this around 12:05. But as you start joining, if we could ask that you just keep yourself on mute. It'll make it a little easier for the presenters today with managing the background noise. And we will also, we've got about an hour of your time today, so we know it's fairly important. There will be a Q&A session at the end of today, which will allow you to ask a lot of questions. We know they'll come up. So for those that have just joined, I'm going to be repeating myself for the next few minutes quite a lot, just to allow people to come in. So as you're joining us, if you could just put yourself on mute, that would be fantastic, managing the background noise. We would like this to be interactive today, so we know you're going to have questions, and if you do, we'd ask that you use the raise your hand feature that's available through Teams up the top of your ribbon there, or you can use the chat section to type up your question. You will have a lot of questions. We've done a few of these. They've proved very popular this series. I think last time we had around 60 registrations, anticipating well over 60 again today. So it says that the particular topic and cybersecurity is still very, very important. We will again record the session and ensure that it is distributed to you. So we find that is helpful. There's a lot that we will unpack today. And we'll do a set of introductions shortly through your panelists. We've put together some industry heavy hitters, some people with a lot of experience in both dealing with the type of attacks that we're all very, very worried about, and also guiding people through the legalities of our responsibilities as directors and owners of businesses. Once again, my name's Adam Nixon, and I'm going to talk you through the next few minutes while we've got people trickling in. We've got a lot of people joining already, I can see. Filling up very, very fast. We've already got over 30 people, as I said, anticipating a hell of a lot more. So we'll give them a few more minutes to keep trickling in, and then I'm going to ask my panelists to make some introductions shortly. We'll due to kick off, we hope, around 12:05. If anyone has any questions in the short term between now and 12:05, feel free to, again, put your hand up. You can use that raise your hand function or just put it in chat. My colleagues and I will endeavour to answer those questions through the course of the presentation today, but we'll also unpack those with an open Q&A session at around 12:45 this afternoon. The presentation or the content that Scotty from K-Mathric Tech will be providing you will go for around 35 to 40 minutes. We're just very conscious that you've spent a lot of time with us today. If you do have any questions, feel free to put them in chat now. Give people another minute here. We've still got a lot of people trickling through, I can see. And we'll find that people will continue to join after we get started. We're not too far off starting for those that are just joining. As I said, sorry for those that have heard this a few times, but as you're joining, if you could put yourself on mute, just to help us manage that background noise, would be fantastic. Thank you for that. We'll get some intros done shortly. And once again, the content and presentation today will be both recorded and made available to you. We typically find that you may want to go back and share it with your colleagues, which we want to make sure we allow for that. Probably a good time to tell you a little bit about the Security Collective. The Security Collective is simply that, a collective of like-minded MSPs across the country. We've got partners from Canberra, from Sydney, from Melbourne, from South Australia, and you'll get an introduction to some of them shortly. Not all of them can attend today. Our colleagues from OPC aren't there, but we are MSPs that have come together with one goal to do some education for Australian businesses around the threat that digital attack represents. So We are sure you're going to enjoy this. As I said, we've done quite a few. Looking at the time, I might just get a nod from my colleagues. I think we might get started. And on that note, I'll do some very quick introductions. Probably the key guy today, Scotty Mathrick, is going to do the presentation, so I might get him to say a few words from Kane Mathrick Tech.
Thanks, Adam. Morning, everyone. My name's Scott. I'm the Technical Director here at KMT. About 20 years experience in the MSP world, so always have been working in that MSP environment, and at the moment am the Technical Director at KMT, so I oversee the professional services team and really our whole cyber stack we have here for our clients.
Pleasure to have you on board, Scott. Appreciate that. He's also going to walk you through the content today. I might go to Jody Corber from Lanrex, do a quick introduction.
Hi everyone, Jody Corber, Managing Director at Lanrex. We're a Sydney-based IT service provider, and we work with organisations that are really in need of a partner that can help drive their digital strategies. And cybersecurity and risk management is a fundamental component of this. It's really great to be part of the Security Collective, and I hope you get a lot out of the session today.
Thanks so much, Jody. And Chris from Subnet out of South Australia.
Chris Cheshire, Senior Business Consultant at Subnet. We're an Adelaide-based managed service security provider as well. We've been around for 20 plus years. My role is a Senior Business Consultant. We obviously support the majority of business with cybersecurity, and I head up the incident response team as well. So welcome today.
Fantastic wealth of experience. And last but certainly not least, Dudley from Gadence.
Thanks, Adam. Welcome everyone, and hope you enjoy today's session. I'm a partner at Gadens Lawyers based in Melbourne. As you can read there from the short bio, most of the work I do is in the tech space, helping businesses to respond to security incidents, ransomware attacks, privacy breaches, and all those things. So hopefully we get an opportunity to have a bit of a chat about that sort of thing today, and feel free to ask lots of questions. Hopefully we'll get to some of those as well towards the end. Thanks.
I will say at the thank you so much, Dudley. I will say you proved very popular at the end of last month's session. People seem to gravitate towards Dudley's experience, and I think brings a bit of a wealth of experience and a different type of view onto this panel. So fantastic, appreciate that. Look, on that note, one last time I will ask you to, if you've joined sort of late there, just to keep yourself on mute. I'm going to throw over to Scott to get us started with the content you've come to see today. So with no further ado, Scott, I'm going to ask you to get us started. And again, we'll come out of that around hopefully 12:40. If you can still hang around with us, we'll give you an opportunity to ask some of those questions. So thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So firstly, we're going to go over a deck today. It's probably about 35 to 40 minutes of presentation. The things we're going to follow or cover are here. So why cyber crime will continue to surge in 2022. Is my business really at risk? How a cyber attack would affect my business? And I'm going to try and give you as many live examples today of what we're seeing around the market. As Adam said, we've got 4 companies in this call. We manage between us probably between 500 and 700 small businesses around Australia. So we do hear a lot and see a lot of actually what's happening around the market. So I want to try and give you as much real live examples today as possible, and not just really a theory-driven presentation. We're going to talk about the critical layers of security using the Essential 8. I hope you've all heard of what the Essential 8 is, but we'll deep dive into that as well. And things that you can do today to protect your business from an attack. So first of all, the growing endpoints outside. So basically what's happening now during COVID, a lot of things have changed given COVID, but what we're now doing is we're now working from home, we're working from cafes, we're working outside of the castle walls, so to speak. So we're no longer protected by a decent firewall with UTM protection or any of that smarts that we had to actually protect the network. We're all now working from bespoke locations. We could be at home, well, we could be tethered to a Telstra mobile phone or a hotspot or something. I was working last week down at Chadstone Shopping Centre. I was on their Wi-Fi. So now it's not only about protecting the perimeter of the environment, but it's actually we're now protecting the endpoint, meaning all the computers that you're using from wherever you're working from. Extended environments also make protecting data much difficult. We're all using supply chain or some kind of supply chain now. A lot of people, given COVID, have used OneDrive, Dropbox to share files. I know of one company that actually, they're a dental lab. They share their files with external parties, which is what a lot of small businesses do. One of the parties they had shared that data with had a cyber attack. They didn't know about it. It happened on Friday night. Then they came in and one of their whole folders had been encrypted on their server because from the third party, all that data had come back in. So it's really important now that we understand where our data is sitting, and we'll talk more about that later on. Misconfiguration of cloud environments as well. Everyone's on Office. Most people are on Office 365 or some kind of cloud-based platform, whether it's Azure or AWS. And most people think that because they're in cloud, their data's safe, and that's not the case. Cloud is a platform. It's your responsibility, and you have to look after your data sitting within that platform. And then the last one is untrained users, so lack of understanding of cyber responsibilities. So this really comes down to having all that training in place for our businesses and creating a culture within our companies where it's a front of mind all the time, and we're educating our users on why they have to change their passwords every 30 days or 60 days. So they are getting frustrated, but they actually understand why they're doing it. And educating them on what phishing looks like and giving them all that SAT training, that security awareness training to know when they get that pop-up to ask for an Office 365 password reset. They actually know what to do, and it's in the front of mind all the time. So it's not just a checklist or a tick-off box that we're trying to do that they do for a week once a year and then it's finished. It's ongoing. It's 12 months a year. We're putting out SAT training. We're educating the users so they're thinking about it all the time. And so let's go over some of the facts. So a lot of the data here that I'm going to present today is from the government breaches report. So the notifiable breaches report, it comes out every 6 months. You can go and download it yourself. It's from the website, and it has the facts on it. So these facts come out all the time based on Australia. So at the moment, it's around about 207 days is the average time now that we're finding when companies have a breach. It's 207 days after they actually identify that breach. So to give you an example of that, we know of an MSP in Queensland. One of their clients had a breach, and what they did, the attackers got in and they got into their backup system. So typically what happens with a backup system, you have a restore point. So you could be keeping backups for 90 days. And then once you get to the 90 days, it starts to overwrite all the other backups. What the attackers had done, they got into the system, they'd unselected all the folders from the backup. So the backup was completing successfully every night. So the MSP at the time that were managing it assumed that it was working. And then after the 90 days, basically they had overridden everything, and then they planted a ransomware infection in that environment. So MSP, and the reason we found out about this is because we've been talking to the end client. So the MSP went in, they went to try and restore backups and realized they had no backups. So then they had no other option but to pay the ransomware. They had 29 servers, so quite a large company. They paid the ransomware. It was about $54,000. They got the keys back. Then they started the restore. The restore took about 3 weeks. But what had happened is the attackers had only given the ransomware keys for 27 of the servers and not the other 2 remaining servers. The other 2 remaining servers were domain controllers, so they had to then go back, pay another ransomware. I don't know what the other ransomware fee was, but I'm assuming it was about the same. They then got the keys. They had to restore. They were down for about 6 weeks. They restored most of their data, but the actual business impact was not only loss of money paying the ransomware, obviously loss of staff wages, loss of contracts. It was a government-based company or dealt with government, so they aren't getting contracts and tenders anymore. So it's really crippled their business. So it's really important to understand that when something happens, normally the attackers have been in there for some time. 5% of data, of business data, is protected. This is a big one and something we all need to think about, especially given COVID. We're all working from home. Like I said before, everyone's got their own Google Drives. You got OneDrives, you got Dropbox, you got Box. Data's going everywhere. We had one customer last year that wanted to know where their data was. We put an appliance in their actual, I'm not sure if someone's got their microphone turned on, but can we please get everyone just to mute their microphones? So this company wanted to know where all their data was going. We put in an appliance last year and the company had no idea, but they had all their staff had actually taken on their own way of sharing data to their home machines, and they had everything in their box, OneDrive, Google Drive, everything. So it's really important now that we understand where our data is sitting. 94% of malware is delivered by email. We'll touch on that later. And 43% of attacks are targeting small business in Australia. That's always been the case. We seem to think because we're small businesses, our data is not important to the attackers, and it's not, but it's important to us. And if we don't have it, we're willing to pay for it. So it's really important that we start to really take our data seriously. And 95% is human error. This always comes up on all the reports every year. It's, again, not having that SAT training in our staff actually trained up and understanding what they should and shouldn't be doing when those suspicious emails come through. So some more stats from the reports. So this comes out again as part of the 6 monthly report that comes out by the government. So phishing's always up there. Phishing's one of the biggest things. We've all seen the passwords that come from JB Hi-Fi or the password resets or a voucher, Ozpost. They're always coming up, Office 365 password resets. So again, that is delivered via email, but we're always getting those password resets. And stolen credentials on the dark web, that's one of the big things. So one of our clients, probably about 3 years ago, a lady had a password reset that came up on Office 365. She didn't think anything of it. She typed in her password at the time. Her password was Angel123. We had, luckily they were on our cyber platform, so we had a ticket that comes straight into our help desk because she had been listed on the dark web. So we called the lady up. We said, hey, Anne, you've just had a password breach. Is the password Angel123? She said, yeah, it is. And we said, what else is that password used for? And she said, it's my Medicare login, it's my banking login. It was her Foxtel, it was her Netflix. I said, right, you got to change your password straight away. So we need to be monitoring the dark web for all these things that are actually coming up. And again, having that SAT training in there and that education that's happening monthly all the time, we're just trying to train our users that they shouldn't have a password that's the same for everything. They should have a password for work that's different to their Facebook account. And then we see the brute force attacks, which are always in there as well. We take on clients all the time, and the first thing we do is a security audit and assessment. And we have some tools that we put on those servers to actually find out what's coming in from outside. And we've gone out to clients where they've had the wrong ports open to the internet, where we've seen over 60,000 attacks that are happening each day, where someone from outside has a password cracker or a generator, and they're trying to just to pepper that internet link and actually try and guess what that password is. So from the report as well, we do see a lot of brute force attacks as well. And then the last one, which is quite small, is ransomware. But really, ransomware is small in this report, but they're using the phishing attacks and the stolen creds to actually get into the system. So again, ransomware is always high on most of the reports. So meanwhile, in Australia, based on those reports last year, there was $33 billion of lost business due to some kind of cybercrime last year. 310% of cyber incidents, which we all know, that's growing and growing. 15% ransomware last year. So this is from the last half report of last year. So this is the latest report. But the biggest one there was on the right-hand side there. It's a 13% increase in attacks. So 67,500 reports were lodged last year to the Australian government with attacks that are happening here, which is quite high. And to put that into context and give you some examples of what's happening, these are some of the well-known businesses that you've probably heard of and some of the actual attacks that have happened. We had Cabrini Hospital. They lost 15,000 patient records. And if you think about how dangerous that is, we're talking about blood types, allergies, their medications, their sensitive data. So that was leaked. That was published in the Herald Sun at the end of 2019. We had Toyota. They lost their phone system in Port Melbourne. This was early last year. They had a ransomware attack and it affected their phone systems. So all their head office phone systems went off. We had the government. You would have seen that Scott Morrison article in the ABC last year where they had a cyber attack and they blamed not having their antivirus software up to date. That's what they explained that was. We had the AFL. They had 75,000 patient records compromised last year. addresses, phone numbers, membership numbers. So not as important or as crucial as Cabrini, but again, a large company that's still going through that. We had Southern Health was taken down most recently. We had friends working at Southern Health where all their systems went down, all their data was encrypted. They were down for about 2 weeks. So you think of the impact of that kind of information when you're running a hospital. You've got patients coming in, you need that data there. You've got patients coming in for operations and procedures. All that data was gone. So for 2 weeks, the Southern Health were trying to get the data back. They were rescheduling, they were cancelling patients. It had a massive effect on that hospital system. And then Toll, everyone's heard of Toll twice last year. So they had an attack by a company called the Knee Film Gang, and it affected their parcel tracing. So when you had a parcel, there's a phone app, you log into your phone app and you can see where the parcel is. It took that offline for about a week and a half. So Toll then went out, they then plugged that hole, they fixed it, they didn't fix it properly, and then a group of hackers went in and did the same thing about a week and a half later and took the application down for a second time. So probably the key takeaway from this slide is these are all well-known companies, they're large companies, and they have budgets for cyber security platforms. They have a lot higher budgets than most of us, and they're still having attacks. So it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't mean that anything's bulletproof. We've just got to do the best we can based on the budgets that we have to actually make sure that we can put in the best line of defense. And we'll talk more about that later. So some more information. So this is relevant. Everyone knows about what's going on in Ukraine. So this is the latest information from the Australian Cyber Security Centre. This is a website. It's a government website, and you can browse to this, and they're posting up updates all the time. And they are now listing that there's actual known reporting threat actors where Russia are actually employing companies of hackers to actually deploy malware in Ukraine businesses to try and take down the country. So this is real, it's happening all the time. And if we keep going down this slide, there was a warning. There has been a warning for Australia as well. So this was put out by Scott Morrison only a couple of weeks ago. So he's issued a warning as well. And what's actually happened here, to put in some context, Russia have gone out and they've actually hired a group called Conti, C-O-N-T-I, and they're a known group of Russian attackers. And what they're doing, they're developing ransomware to target small businesses within Ukraine. So this is actually happening now. Now, this group called Conti are most famous for the island takedown. So there's an island health services, which is similar to Southern Health of what we have here. They had a ransomware attack mid last year. It took down the whole health service in Ireland, and the ransomware, which they haven't paid because they restored from backup, but they had a demanding ransomware of $20 million. So we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but this is just one group of attackers that Russia have employed to actually start this process. It's one of many. So this is happening now all the time. So the types of attacks, we're going to focus on this quickly and actually give you a bit of an understanding of what's being hit. So, or what's happening. So assume you will be hit. That's the best place to think that eventually one day this is going to happen. We're hearing of it all the time. We're going to see new clients and do inductions of new companies that are coming on board, and they've all got stories about they've lost data, or they know a close business that has lost data. Second, backup obsessively. We need to be doing our backups. Now, any MSP should be doing this for you anyway. It's not so much a cyber platform. This is a basic MSP platform. So we want to have your data backed up, and 3 data sets all the time. So what that means is a set of production data, a good on-site backup. So if something does happen, we can restore really quickly, and then an off-site backup to a third-party data center. So as an example, all our clients back up to a data center in Sydney. It's off the client's network. It's with a different provider. So if anything did happen and we can't back up from on-premise with the backup we have there, then we've also got our off-site backup as well. I know our company, we monitor about 600 or 700 backups a night. We have failed backups. There's so many backups, but they're monitored. We do test restores, and we actually have tickets that come in. So when a backup does fail, it flags with our service desk, and the team can go and actually check out that backup. So like I said before, in that example, it's great having backups, but we need to be going in and doing restores to make sure that we can actually get that data out. Layered protection. Again, understanding what our crown jewels are. So we really need to understand where most of our revenue is coming from. It could be a sales platform. It could be your CRM. Whatever that is for you, we need to understand where that data is sitting and start protecting that data first, because doing cyber protection across your whole business can be expensive. But if we can peel back the layers and really understand where all our revenue comes from and where that data is most important, that's where we need to start focusing on first. Then we need to combine experts in technology. So again, using proper third-party products, not MSP products like antivirus software, but dedicated software that actually can stop ransomware in its tracks. So we have different products that we use for all our clients. Every single client that we manage at KMT, we have an anti-ransomware piece of software that's deployed to every machine. So again, it's not your typical antivirus software. So it's understanding the technology and where to plug those holes. Number 5, don't pay the ransom. So obviously, in the example that I spoke of before, they had to pay the ransom because they had no backups. But providing we're doing the right thing and ticking off the right boxes, we should have a backup in there to restore from. And then last of all, have a recovery plan. So when something does happen, we aren't scrambling. We've got it can be a short document even, as long as it's got the phone numbers of all the third parties, our cyber insurance people, our IT teams, our management, just so we know of the first step to take and the people that we actually have to call when something does happen. And then just to wrap up this ransomware slide is what we're seeing now this year is a lot of extortion as well. So hackers now are coming to companies and they're saying, right, we've encrypted your data. They're asking them to pay the ransom, and then the client's saying, well, I don't need to pay your ransom because I've got backups. And now what the hackers are doing, we're saying you've got 7 days or I'm putting all your information on the dark web regardless, even if you don't pay the ransom. And if that happens, you've been breached, you then have to notify that to the government. So having the right platform in place is hopefully going to stop you from getting there so that you aren't put in that position. So business email compromises, this is what I was referring to before. So this is the biggest thing we're seeing. If you're looking at the government report, this is where most of the stuff's happening, where all the breaches are coming through. So invoice fraud, I'm sure nearly everyone on this call has heard of some kind of invoice fraud. One of the examples that we've dealt with, it was a football player, a well-known football player. He went and bought a house. The surveyor got all the documentation ready and sent him all the information to pay the deposit on the house. The football player, he paid the deposit. The surveyor rang him a couple of days later and said, hey, you haven't paid it. You're going to lose house. He goes, no, I've paid it. I paid it a couple of days ago. He says, no, you still haven't. And then on investigation, they realised that the surveyor, who was on Google Mail at the time, had a breach. Someone had come in. They doctored the BSP account number. The other person had paid the invoice. It was $200,000 and the money was gone. So that's a really tough one because who's responsible for that? Is it the surveyor because his system wasn't locked down, or is it the third party paying the bill? I know whenever I pay any large bill now, I pick up the phone and I ask to speak to the accounts lady and I clarify their BSP and account number over the phone. It's old school, it works. That's what we need to be doing, especially across all our accounts departments. Employee impersonation, again, when someone gets access to that email account and they start to email out on your behalf. So that's when there's a phishing attack. As an example, you haven't had MFA turned on, you're listed on the dark web, someone comes and finds your password, they go to mail.office365.com, they log in as you, they sit there and watch what's happening. They create rules, so everything that comes in, they mark as read and they put it into a subfolder so that you can't see it. And then they can respond on your behalf and try and reach out and try and get money or whatever they're trying to do that way, plan ransomware or all kinds of things. Company impersonation, this is one of the big ones that's actually starting to happen now, or probably the last couple of years actually, but this is when people are using a similar domain name and they're trying to create your account and mimic who you are. So as an example, we spoke about Toll before. So the domain name is www.toll.com or .au. We could register a brand new domain called www.toll, so TOL.com.au. When you're looking through the web browser, it looks exactly the same. I can then go onto LinkedIn and I can find all the employees that work at Toll. I can go and create all their accounts under my new domain. I can go onto all the marketing part of LinkedIn and find the email signatures, the roles and responsibilities of all those people. I can copy their signatures and I can doctor up something that looks pretty similar, and then I can start emailing all your employees. So there could be a new accounts person starting. I could send her an email with an invoice saying, hey, welcome aboard. And we speak the same language as what the CEO is speaking and try and doctor up something very similar. And if that end user hasn't been educated or doesn't have that cyber training in place, she goes, oh, well, it's from the director, I've got to pay it straight away. And they go and pay that invoice. So that's what we're seeing happening around the market as well. MFA, everyone should have MFA on anything you access. You've been doing it for years. You transfer money through CommBank, ANZ, Westpac. They've always sent you a SMS message for anything that's probably over $5,000. You get the SMS with a 4-digit code, and you put that code back in. It's exactly the same thing. So on our, especially our Office 365 accounts, if we VPN, we can use it for that access as well. But we need to have MFA on all our phones to make sure that everything is secure. And then obviously a business plan in place. We spoke about that before. But yeah, just making sure that you've got a plan if something does go wrong, but you've also got to stop. So a standard operating procedure that when that bill's paid or when something's happening, there's a whole guideline that we follow as a business. So how are we prepared as a business? I did want to touch on this because a lot of people say that they are prepared to deal with cyber, but some of the things that we need to start thinking of are the responsibility within the business. And I think over the last year, that now business owners are actually, they realise now that it's their data and they're responsible. So we need to make sure that we have the governance in place and understand what's required and build that all, into all areas of the business. So in supply chain, in sales, in all areas. It's not just in accounting where people are actually paying bills. It's across the whole business. And again, it comes down to that SAT training again, but also understanding what the obligations are. So we all have to report to different parties. If we're share listed, we have to report to ASIC, there's APRA, there's a Data Privacy Act, the Data Consumer Act. So again, knowing where you fall into, which category, should something go wrong, you have to report to those parties. And having cyber insurance is one of the key things there, because if something does go wrong, you can pick up the phone and speak to that person, and they can actually guide you on every single person that you have to notify as a business based on your industry. But also having compliance as well. So not only when something goes wrong, but we can prove that during the last 12 months, we've had a cyber platform in place. I know we work with a lot of government parties, some of our clients work with government parties, and to actually transact now with government, we'll speak about this later on, but you now have to have the essential 8 in place. So one of our clients has to actually send the people that they're dealing with reports every single month of their cyber risk profile. So our platform is in place, and they get their reports from us, and they send them on every single month. So they're making sure that they have compliance, but they've embedded that whole process into their business. And we need to understand the B2B operations as well. We're dealing with all third parties now all the time. There's so much stuff happening. We're all using SaaS platforms. We need to understand where our data's sitting and whose responsibility is it if something goes wrong. So as an example, we looked at a third party a couple of years ago for some password management software, and they had in clear writing that if they were breached, it wasn't their responsibility. So we didn't partner with that company. They didn't have anything about yearly audits or anything, whereas a company that we've partnered with now, they have a penetration test every quarter, they have compliance requirements, and we get sent all those reports every year. So partnering with that third party, we're confident that they're doing the right thing. And we need to monetize our data to really understand, like I said, where the crown jewels are. We have plenty of companies that can, if they have a cyber breach, and if they're, as worst case, if their data is encrypted, they can work for weeks and then work off paper. And once the system is back up, they can rekey back that information. Now, of course, it's not great, but it's saving them the cost of having a cyber platform in place, where we have other clients that if they're down for a week, they can lose $1 million a week. So you really need to monetize and understand what it's going to cost you as a business to be down for that time. And some people monetize that just as purely staff wages. If they've got, say, they've got 40 staff and they can't work, it's that weekly pay, that pay amount, and that's how they monetize that. So it is important, but as businesses, I think over the last couple of years now, we're really starting to understand that it's our responsibility, but there's so many more spokes that are actually coming in that we need to consider. So why should you be considering a cyber strategy now, and what's the Essential 8? So this is, and hopefully you've all heard of this, the Essential 8. But basically, it's a framework of strategies that the government have put in over the last couple of years, and when I say strategies, it's a baseline strategy. It's 8 recommendations that we're going to talk about shortly, but it's what we see as the minimum to protect your business. And we'll go through what those 8 strategies are now. So application whitelisting. So this is when we actually allow certain apps to run. So there's other products like Microsoft Intune where we can specify on your devices which apps are actually certified to run. Patching applications, so like your PDF viewers, your Java, Flash, any of those third-party apps. Now, your MSP typically should be doing that for you now. And then going down the bottom left-hand side to configure macros. So this is one of the biggest things that come out of the Essential 8. And the reason is what attackers are doing now, they're actually building all their attack malware to actually work out of an Office 365 or an Office macro. So as an example, Excel, they have a macro embedded in that program. So you may have macros that go out and do a certain task or try and change a spreadsheet. The reason attackers are actually targeting macros is because they're a trusted Windows process. So when your antivirus or your ransomware software is running to see what's happening, the macros through Excel are a trusted Windows process. So your antivirus software won't even pick it up. So for an attacker, it's really simple. And then we go over to the applications hardening. So again, having the browsers and actually configuring your browsers to block everything. So as an example, you shouldn't be storing passwords in your Google browsers, because if your Google browsers are compromised, all your passwords are in there. So I don't store any passwords in there at all. I use a proper dedicated password manager, and all my passwords are listed under lock and key. Restrict admin privileges. Most MSPs should be doing this for you. So that's when you're a standard user, you shouldn't have admin access to your computer device at all. I have admin access to my device, but it's under a second account. So when I log in each day, like I'm talking now, I'm on a standard, not the same account as what everyone else would log in as. But if I had to go and do something to the system, I would log off and I'd log in with a system admin account. Patch operating systems, again, MSP should be doing that for you. So that's keeping your operating systems up to date. So not using Windows 7, not using Server 2008. They're no longer supported by Microsoft. We're not getting updates on those operating systems anymore. MFA we've spoken about. We should have MFA on pretty much everything we can do. Again, it's not always built into the MSP base offering. We've built it into ours across the last year and a half, just because we think that there's a great need for it. But you should have MFA turned on everything. And then your backups, you should be doing backups, and you should have offsite backup as well. So again, having that 3 sets of data so that if something does go wrong, or if there's a flood, or if your server fails, we've actually got proper tested and verified backups that we can restore your data as soon as possible. So going now to the guidelines for the incident. So there's 3 main pillars there, and we actually get this off NIST framework. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's a framework that was developed in 1903, and it deals with some of the large companies like the Bank of England, Boeing 747, and it puts a framework in for all the industries of what needs to be followed. So the first one we have there is detection. So having the right tools in place. So if there's a breach, we understand that there's an actual breach happening. So the red flags go up, so to speak, and we can actually see the attack coming in. Now, that doesn't stop the attack. It just tells us that something's happening. So having the right tool sets in place, and this would be a tool like SIEM or some kind of log management that sits there and actually watches what's happening. And then we go down to management. So having the right platform in place to actually contain the data spills. So understanding our risks, understanding our crown jewels, trying to monetize where our biggest assets are, and putting in a platform around that in the event of an incident to hopefully stop everything. But again, that's what's going to actually give us our protection. So first, we're trying to detect when it's coming in. Secondly, we've got a platform in there that's going to manage it, and it's actually going to hopefully contain or stop what's happening. And then the third party is the reporting. So when we have to report to those third parties, and also reporting internally, shareholders and boards and the like. So again, having, like I said before, that cyber insurance where we can pick up the phone and ring someone, and you ring them up and they actually have crisis management, they have lawyers, they have the right people there to actually tell you what to do. It's important, especially if you do have some form of cyber insurance. In the event of a breach, the first thing that the cyber insurance will say to you is tools down, don't touch anything. So we do that. And then if that does happen, what they would say is, right, we're going to send out our team of forensics. Now, normally it's 48 hours. So that means straight away you're down to 48 hours anyway, because you can't touch your data. And sometimes we've sent it up to 7 days. They will send out their team and they'll go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and they'll try and find out where the breach has come in, why it's come in, and ultimately, if you're responsible for that breach. So that first two pillars there of having the detection and the management platforms in place are really important. And then if that does happen, it's great if you've got your backups and they're up to date or some kind of DR platform, because then we can restore you to some third-party servers or platform to get you up and running again, while we've left the old environment sitting there for them to actually go on and looking, because the process can take some time. So why the regulations? So in 2020, actually, the government announced they're going to invest 1.67 billion into the next 10 years for cybersecurity for Australia. So they're getting tougher on it. Again, though, we're talking about the Essential 8. The government now are regulated. They have to have it. So they have to now prove compliance that they are using the Essential 8. And also parties now that are transacting with governments, they're now starting to get asked for that now. So it's best practice. Again, there's so much more that you can do when it comes to cyber, but this is the minimum that the government are asking for this now. And in the next years to come, we're going to see that all small businesses are going to now be forced to actually prove compliance with the Essential 8. So that's starting now. So I wanted to talk about the evolving MSP stack, because this is important to understand what the MSP did prior to sort of COVID, and then now what's happening, because there has been a massive change. So as a standard MSP, you would do an audit and assessment. We provide anti-spam, we provide antivirus, we patch your applications, we manage your firewall, and we provide and verify backups. That's a basic MSP offering. And all this changed last year. Given COVID, as I said before, we're now trying to protect the endpoint, and everyone went home to work. So now in 2021, we went from the MSP to the MSSP, and we're focusing now more on cybersecurity. And that included last year password managers, SAT training, so security awareness training, endpoints. So we're actually trying to protect the endpoint, to actually have specialized software on all the endpoints, whether it's laptop, desktop, tablets, whatever that you guys use, but to make sure that we've got software on there that we can stop ransomware in its tracks. MFA become a must last year for most companies. Web content filtering. So again, we're trying to block all the nasty websites and bad places that are coming up through the browser. You know, we've got old people working from home. We're working anywhere now. We're working on different devices. We don't have the control that we once had, where everyone was in the office on a work provided asset. During COVID, we couldn't get laptops, we couldn't get desktops, we couldn't get monitors. So everyone ran home and they jumped on their children's machines or whatever they could find just to work. So COVID really changed the way that everyone worked. SIEM solutions, we put in about 30 SIEM solutions last year across our customer fleet. So that's that detection layer that I spoke about before, that when something comes in, we're actually seeing it. We're seeing it happen, the red flags go up, and then we can actually act on it. And we're doing a lot of Microsoft 365 backups and also monitoring as well. So that's become quite large for us last year. And risk assessment, because clients now are coming back to us and saying, right, we're now in a half-half workforce. We're working from home. We're in the office a couple of days a week. What's the risk now? So we're doing a lot of risk assessments. And fast forward to 2022, threat management's one of the big ones now, and compliance reporting more than anything. Companies are now coming to us and asking us if they're compliant with the Essential 8, and then they're asking us to prove it. So again, it's getting that platform in and making sure that they're getting the monthly reports. Like I was saying before, it's not just a checkbox that we do an audit once a year and we tick it and we're done. It's evolving, it's month to month, and we do reporting every month, and we ingrain that into all areas of the business. SIEM, so we're putting in all that SIEM infrastructure. Scanning, so we're scanning now firewalls. That's happening heaps now. That we've got clients now that are coming and actually asking for that, because they want to be sure that their environment is secure. MDM, so if anyone doesn't know what MDM stands for, it's mobile device security. So that's now where, again, we're all working from random places and with random devices as well. Over the last year, a lot of companies now have allowed users to bring their own devices. So It's putting the right agents and infrastructure out there to actually monitor those devices and actually understand where's our data going. So as an example, if we're all on SharePoint, a lot of us have OneDrive. We can walk down to JB Hi-Fi. I can go and buy a laptop for $1,000. I can come home, and if I had your username and password for Office 365, I would log into SharePoint and I would sync all your data down to that device. I'd work from home. And if I gave notice the following week, that laptop just walks away with all your company data on it. So a lot of the companies that we're speaking to now are really cautious about understanding where that data is sitting. So if it's OneDrive, if it's Box, Dropbox, and where it's been shared to as well. And MDM or other solutions like that can actually put some governance in and report and actually advise where all that data is going. We spoke about the application whitelisting, again, a part of the Essential 8. Identity management, so again, having one portal where users can authenticate properly in a secure manner against all their tools. That's becoming big this year as well. And DLP, so data loss prevention solutions. We're installing a lot of DR platforms at the moment for us, just because people know that if their data's gone now, they can't work. So we're having a lot of conversations about that with our clients at the moment. So what's the benefit of working with a cyber partner? Depth of expertise, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show you that previous slide, because it really tells you the differences of what's evolved in the last couple of years and why it's really important now that most MSPs can't do your cyber element for you. They're an MSP, that's what they do. They keep the lights on, they check your backups, they patch your apps, but that's where their limitations stop. So we need to make sure that we're partnered with a proper cyber MSSP that can give you that platform. Breadth of expertise and experience in multiplication. We have a team now. We've got a dedicated SOC and NOC within our team. They're not part of the service desk. It's a separate team, and they're monitoring this stuff all the time. So, and it just scales well. So cyber security, when you try and do it yourself, it's very expensive. Like I said before, you've looked at Toll, AFL House. All these companies have much larger budgets than we have, but still having breaches. So it's sometimes easier just to work out again what the crown jewels are, to monetize what our budgets are, and try and plug those holes the best we can and put in some kind of platform in place. And some of them are really low-hanging fruit. As an example, SAT training, monthly training, where we send out training to all the staff. It goes out on the first Monday of every month, and they get 2 to 3 videos to watch. They're just cartoon videos, and our videos go for between 2 and 13 minutes. And they have to watch those videos, and then we report back on that back to the management team. And then on the 15th of the month, or the first Monday in that period, we go back and we say, right, you've got 13, or you've got 30 clients. We've done the actual training. We've had 18 people finish it. We've got 12 left. Please go and follow those 12 people up. And we build that into our actual management platform so that we can report on that all the time. But again, it's building that culture within the business. So the benefit for having that platform or that partner in place, we close the gaps. We make it simple. It's a monthly fee. It's like your MSP management fee you're paying now. Again, it's like a magic wand where you can set and forget, providing that we're providing you with all that compliance details so that you see the report. For us or anyone else, there's nowhere to hide, and we're doing what we say we're actually doing. And you've got one contact as well. So your MSP, if they're an MSSP as well, we also hand over that technology as well. So you've got one throat to choke. So the first part of what we do when we're starting off this process with anyone is an Essential 8 review. Now, if anyone wants any information on the Essential 8, just browse to the government website, vic.gov.au. It's all listed there, and you can get an understanding of what we've spoken about, those Essential 8. But we go in, we sit with you, we do the Essential 8 review and basically give you a benchmark of where you are in that model. And the levels are from 0 to 3, which I'll touch on in a minute. And then we produce a report for you on where your strong areas are and where your weak ones are. And again, a lot of it's very simple to fix. And then we can give you an estimate on budget as well. So that's where the Essential 8 review pretty much comes in, but it'll give you a good benchmark to understand as your business, but probably also as well give you other stuff to think about of other areas of your business, which are nowhere near even compliant at all. So if we're looking at the levels, we've got 0 to 3 here. I won't focus on this slide too much. You'll get a copy of this slide deck anyway. But most of the people that we're working with are between levels sort of 1 and 2, and that's basically having the essential aid in place and having some kind of compliance wrapped around it. So the pandemic effect, I did want to talk on this because we've all gone home from work. It's been a huge change for everyone. We're no longer behind the castle walls anymore. We're no longer in that work setup anymore with that firewall that's protecting the network. We're at home. We're at home with our kids. I know my children are on the internet. They play Roblox. They watch movies. We could be tethered to a mobile phone. We could be at a shopping centre. We're working from anywhere now. So again, it's really important that we can protect the endpoint. All the stats that came out last year, the middle one there. So the average breach from home now, and this is from IBM, is $137,000. If we rewind about 3 years ago, the average breach from home was about $25,000. So everything's increasing, and it's increasing rapidly. But again, just the risk. We know Zoom had a massive attack last year. And again, Zoom, if you followed share plotting, Zoom went through the roof last year just because everyone jumped on it. So it's a key target. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of the Colonial Pipeline attack last year. So what happened in the States last year? That's the main oil source for the States. And there was a Russian company called Evil Group. So they're a criminal group. They were actually put together by a cell of investors to target people working from home. What they did, they worked out all the people from this company were working from home. They eventually breached one person, and how they breached that one person was on the dark web. They found their username and their password because they had a dark web breach. They then used that information. They hacked their systems. They planted ransomware, and they took down the oil pipeline for about a week, which all the petrol stations had limited petrol for about a week. So it was a massive outage, but they attacked people working from home. So again, you can jump on Google and find that out. The US government had actually placed a $5 million a reward ransom on actually finding that group. They still haven't found them yet. So this stuff's happening all the time now. So some of the trends that we're seeing, well, we know with the pandemic, there's an increase of about 75% of the incidents resulting in Australians losing money. Disruption of essential services. We all know about Cabrini. I talked about Southern Health as well. So this is happening everywhere now. Ransomware is up 15% off the government report. The supply chain, again, I really want you guys to think about that and actually understand where your data is coming in from, what other third parties that your systems are sucking in data from, and how they're protecting their systems as well. Because I don't think up until this point we've thought about that. But COVID's made us really try to understand the systems and where that data is coming in. So the BEC, again, the business email compromise, massive increase. So the average compromise there, we've got about 55K there. That's happening all the time now. And again, just having that basic SAT training in place can actually stop that from happening. And yeah, one of the key takeouts is business owners they now recognise that they are responsible. If you read the fine print by Microsoft in Office 365 or Azure, it's their platform, it's your data, it's your responsibility. It's very clear. And the uptake in cyber insurance, if you don't have cyber insurance, it's recommended that you do have that. Again, it's not going to stop you from having a breach, but in the event that something goes wrong, you've got a phone number, you've got a crisis plan, and you can ring up someone and really be guided through what has to happen. So just the next steps. So I suppose a question that you need to ask your current provider, if they can actually do that essential review for you, and if it's something that they can manage. And have you got a response plan? So if something does go wrong, what happens? Who's responsible? Who's the first person to call? And a list of everything that has to happen. We did one of our clients did a response plan about a couple of weeks ago, a very small client. Their response plan was 3 pages, but it had everything on there that they needed in the event that something happened. They had all the steps and the phone numbers of the key people that they needed to contact. And it's about protecting your business. So with that, I will throw back to Adam for the Q&A.
Well, a lot to get through, Scott. Having done many of these previously, I can feel for the attendees. It is a lot to take in. There was a lot of technical discussion around it, but effectively, I think what the collective group of companies that have come together are saying is that we want you to expect digital attack. We want you to expect it. And the disruption that will come from it. The disruption could be financial, it can be reputational. And at the end of the day, the really, the small takeaway that we'd like you to all think about is that there's one thing that you need to start to plan for is, how can I recover in a controlled and predictable manner under any circumstances? And, I'm often quite taken aback by the fact that, as Scotty said from the outset, the group of MSPs that are on here, and also Dudley from his experience in specialising in his field through a legal firm, we constantly, I'm amazed that most organisations don't even know that there's an Australian government body that have been doing this for a number of years to help us as business owners to protect ourselves. So, it's easy to bury our heads and think that it won't happen to me. But unfortunately, what you hopefully we've taken out of today is that that's no longer the case. It's getting worse before it gets better. So a lot of content in there. I think what I'd like to do is I'm just conscious of people's time. So we do understand that that we have let you know that this will go through to 1 o'clock. So before we get into any Q&A, I think we will continue with some questions now. So I know Sharon's raised a good question around pen testing. We've got a bunch more here that have come up regularly that we'll go through. But in the event that you do have to exit, we thank you for your time today. I want to thank the panelists who are about to take on some of these questions and the people that have put a lot of effort into providing this content. We hope that you've got benefit from it. Particular thanks to Scott. Which is, your delivery and your ability to tell real world stories, I think makes it a little bit more than a boogeyman story around the campfire, right? As much as we don't want to hear a lot of this real world stories. I mean, we do it for one thing, and that's to try and ensure that, unfortunately, the panelists that are on here and all of us as MSPs too often have to work with companies that are really going through a pretty tragic set of circumstances, right? So we're invested in this, but please take away that message. Start to do a gap analysis, start to protect your business, plan for the worst and hope for the best, because unfortunately it's the age that we live in. So on that note, I want to maybe start with Dudley. In the age of directors' duties and responsibilities ever changing, and board obligations, what are some of the things that boards and their directors should have on their security to-do list? What have you seen in that space?
Thanks, Adam. And I'm conscious that Scott's obviously talked a little bit about this as well, so I'll keep it reasonably short and sweet. I guess there's a couple of messages. The first is the regulators out there, whether they're APRA for those in financial services or more broadly ASIC, are a pretty active bunch of regulators. ASIC in particular has a case at the moment against a financial services company called RI Advice, and the trial set down for a few days from now. And the focus of that is the company's failure to have adequate cybersecurity systems in place and to comply with its obligations under the Corps Act. So very much front and centre for companies. There hasn't been a huge emphasis on board and directors governance up to this point, but we'd be saying nothing happens well in an organisation unless it's coming straight from the top. So a lot of emphasis on having directors understanding their risk environment and putting in place appropriate risk frameworks. Understand where you currently are. There's some quick wins which Scotty's mentioned earlier before, including things like cyber insurance. Again, be careful. Some of the policies aren't as good as all that, so be careful what you do sign up for. Having an incident response plan in place that does work and that you test regularly. We can talk a little bit more about that if that's something that people want to look into. But those are my sort of very brief thoughts, Adam.
Thanks, Dudley. Really great point of view, and we appreciate your experience. I think I might go to Chris. In your experience, as a senior business consultant and working with companies regularly, what are the top 3 things you would do Sorry, we've
That's
just
a good
got
question.
Sorry, Chris. One sec. We just got someone. If you're not talking, if you put yourself on mute. Chris, if you could do three things, what would you do to protect your business? What's the recommendation?
I did try to make this three. I got it down to a top four in a paid environment, and then I did some with some free stuff as well. I think the most important thing is if you are inside a corporate network is having a next generation firewall, having something with UTM, so Unified Threat Management, AV web filtering, geo blocking, basically designed to protect the client. I think they're really powerful still, and that obviously would change if you're working at home. But secondly would be backups. We can't stress enough about backups, and as Scott kind of covered over, online, offline, off-site, and immutable backups, so that you're writing your backup and it's not then capable of being compromised. A dedicated email filter is probably required these days, if not essential. And then I came sort of down to EDR and whitelisting. So if you had to choose one of those together, you would either have EDR, EDR or whitelisting, or both. But one or the other would be good. And some free kind of options that you could use to secure your business would be passphrases instead of passwords. Everybody seems to be trying to make short, complex passwords. That really needs to change to 20 plus characters, where it might be a sentence where it's got spaces and punctuation in it, so it is a bit more secure. Separated accounts for admin privilege functions. Scott touched on that as well. That's like a necessity. Patching both applications and servers within 48 hours of critical updates is kind of a must as well. And your MSP should really be covering that as well. As Scott said, disabling macros in Excel, it can be done quite cheaply by group policy. Multi-factor authentication it kind of comes out of the box with 365 these days. Data encryption you can do yourself as well, so you can actually encrypt the drives of your machines and servers quite cost effectively. And the most important, I think, is end user training. You can get some really good, Fortinet online training, or you can actually pay for it as well.
Yeah, that's great advice, Chris. A lot to unpack there, and then please, there is a wealth of tools available, either through corporates or MSPs, where security awareness training can be baked into your culture, right? And given the fact that most breaches are through staff inadvertently clicking on a link or opening an email, that culture change around having good behaviours and actually being aware of what you're opening is often one of the best things you can do as well, to ensure that the door isn't open to crack, right? Because once that door is open, that's effectively they move laterally to get access to those crown jewels that Scotty talked about. I think one of the things that's important to note here too is that in a lot of ways, cybersecurity and protection is becoming a fairly specialised field. And we talk a little bit about MSP, but we also conscious there's a lot of corporates on this call and that we deal with that have I guess an IT department or an IT team. A lot of them are quite mature, but I guess at the end of the day, Chris, I think I might direct this to you. Is there a place for a co-managed solution, or is a general managed service contract enough to protect your business? Why do I need a cybersecurity as an additional service, and should it be an additional or separate service?
Yeah, I think as Scott's touched on, I mean, the problem with cybersecurity in general is it's expensive if you try and set it up yourself. So I think there's a wealth of knowledge that comes with an MSSP, which is having the market share of all the products that they're coming in, and they can advise the business. Even what Scott touched on with dark web scanning, like that sort of stuff's important, and to set that up internally with Tenable.io or something similar would be quite expensive for the business. So being able to leverage that at a lower cost from an MSP where they're doing that for all of their customers makes financial sense as well. It also allows the IT team to focus on business as usual, or if you've got some people that are looking to get into the cybersecurity area, we can take over the business as usual, and they can run the cybersecurity. So I think it's essential to have a little bit of support and knowledge in the market.
Yeah, great advice. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that we see very regularly, because it's complicated, right? This space is very, very complicated, and a lot of what we do is education. Question that seems to come up time and again is that, hold on, but my data, Scott talked about understanding where your data is stored. He talked about it a lot, right? Both internally and externally. And we live in a day and age where, our data can be stored in multiple locations, in ERP, in SharePoint, in Office 365, right? And we hear a lot from business owners say, hold on, but I don't hold data anymore. I've got a digital presence that is in the cloud. Why do I have risk? Why do I have risk? Can my data still be accessed, given that it is from Salesforce as an example? Scott, do you want to touch on that risk? And you did a little bit through the presentation. What can we do to mitigate that risk? And I think your story was very relevant around the supplier that you chose not to adopt because of their practices, and that may be an answer to the question.
Yeah, look, I mean, I suppose I mentioned crown jewels a few times, but it's really sitting down as a business and understanding where our data is sitting. And most businesses don't understand. When they think cloud, it's just up there somewhere. But until you really understand all your third parties that are bringing data in, how your employees are working and where they're storing their data, and really trying to do workshops within the business and find out where all that data is coming in. Now, the way we did it for one of our clients is we put an actual device in the environment, and it measured or monitored the traffic going in and out. And we had a list of all the traffic that was going out and which person was accessing that traffic. And when we gave that back to the company, they were speechless because they had no idea of where that data was sitting. So that's the biggest thing, is just trying to understand where it's from first. And then if you are planning on partnering with another third-party SaaS provider, ask for their fine print. Ask them what happens in a breach. Ask if they have any compliance that they have to do. Ask them if there's any penetration testing that happens on a yearly basis, and if they publish that to all their clients that subscribe to their services. The one that we said we didn't partner with them, it was to manage our passwords. We manage about 5,000 passwords. It was a risk that was too big for us. So we ended up finding another partner that did it. But we get quarterly reports, we get yearly reports. So we're confident that that partner does what they're saying. The other example that I touched on was the Dropbox one, where we had it was a lab where they had all the information coming in from other dentists. Now, that other dentist, we don't manage them. Our client didn't manage them either, but that other person didn't have the right framework in place. And as a result, he had ransomware, and it came through and it infected his data.
Yeah, it's as I said, it's the more you unpack, the more complicated this can be. I think Sharon raised a really good question. Pen testing is something that her organisation seems to participate in, and how much comfort should an organisation take out of pen testing, and can they hang the hat on pen testing alone? Sharon, feel free to, if you're still on here, take yourself off a mute and just unpack that question so we can adequately answer it for you. But I think if I sense what you're asking, how much comfort should you take out of doing that solely?
Yeah. Thanks. And also, just how frequently should we be doing it? We've got an annual program. Is that enough?
Yeah, really good question. Really good question. Anyone want to tackle that one? Do you want me to handle that one, Scott?
I could touch on it, Adam. I mean, if you're doing it yearly, it's great. There's a lot of clients out that don't even do it, to be honest. So if you're doing it yearly, it's awesome. Most of our larger companies that we look after have it done yearly. But again, because COVID's changed the way that we're working, if we're pen testing, what does that pen testing involve? Are we testing the endpoint, or are we purely just testing the network of the office? Because if we're no longer if our data's not in there, or if our data's not behind that firewall, and we're on all cloud-based services, are we testing the cloud-based services as well? So as an example, when we stand up clients for Azure, we put a dedicated firewall up in Azure and don't use the stock one that comes with Azure. And then we can have penetration tests done against that environment as well. So that's another environment that we need to consider as part of our annual pen testing.
Yeah, and I think if I can add to that, not all pen tests are equal. There is numerous different types, of Scott just touched on. I think it's just understanding what's important for you, and it goes back to that education piece for yourself. We're sort of moving more towards what we call a vulnerability and gap analysis. And that often can include a whole bunch of things that a traditional pen test won't include. Doesn't mean a pen test can't. So just ensuring that you're understanding what it's testing for, where the gaps are, what it's not testing for, and ensuring that you've got a strategy to ensure that those gaps, that firstly, that you're aware of them, number one, and that you either treat them as acceptable risk or unacceptable risk. If they're unacceptable risk, what's the consequences, and working through a strategy to mitigate that risk. So absolutely part of a good strategy, Sharon. Would sort of need to unpack it a little bit more to understand what else you're doing with that. As an example, you know, typical pen test won't include any security awareness training, any type of program. Often what we'll do is that, you know, we want to answer one thing for you with your staff. How likely are they to enable and further an attack if they click on the wrong link? Right. And that's what SAT training is all about. But really good question.
I think it's also important to separate vulnerability testing from pen testing.
Yes.
You know, vulnerability is a scanning service that's looking for open holes, and a pen tester is actually, you know, someone that's behind a keyboard that is using the vulnerabilities from those scans to actually get inside your network. So they're two very different things. And yeah, obviously doing a vulnerability scan to a pen test is very different.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that the key point that we want, you know, that everyone to understand now, and Scott really leveraged it or touched on a lot, is that this concept of protecting the keyboard, it's a result of the digital age that we live in. It's a result of we go home and we give our corporate laptops to our kids because, you know, we want a glass of wine and we want to do those things at the end of the day and we just want a break. So they're busily tapping away and playing on our corporate, and, you know, what are they downloading without us knowing? It's because we're going to want to work from a cafe or McDonald's or anywhere on the planet. And unfortunately, those same protections, which traditional methods are about building a fence around our network, well, that fence doesn't exist anymore. So when Scott talks a lot about protecting the keyboard, things like pen testing in a lot of ways aren't going to be the whole answer. Which is why things like the Essential 8 and that framework is about trying to get holistic on the strategies that are ultimately going to do one thing. And we don't talk about protection anymore. I mean, protection is just a fundamental part of what we do. But again, it's as simple as expect to be disrupted and plan to be able to recover in a controlled and predictable manner. Just very conscious of time. We haven't had too many drop off there, you know, which is why we've still got over outside of presenters, over 30 people on here. So please, if there's any questions that you have, or if you're happy just to continue to listen, we'll keep sort of posing these questions. But if you do have a question, feel free to chuck it in the chat or take yourself off of mute and throw them out there. I think another for you in terms of ransomware, we mentioned in the presentation, and it's an increasing risk. It's an ever-present risk. In terms of the ransomware attacks, and, you know, what would you say are the top 5 priorities for organizations hit by ransomware attack?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, and we could talk all day about ransomware attacks and how to, you know, anticipate them, what to do when they hit, all that sort of good stuff. Just in terms of, I guess, some key takeaways, and Scott's mentioned the importance of incident response planning. I've mentioned it as well in my last sort of comment. If you have an incident response plan in place, then you're better placed to respond quickly when a ransomware attack hits. Often we'll assist clients with developing playbooks around managing ransomware incidents to incorporate within their incident response plan. Our plans are a little bit longer than Scotty's client at 3 pages. They certainly can certainly get up there. First priority, lock down the breach. Understand that it's really key to isolate that from the rest of your environment. Once you've done that, you can understand or try and work out what sort of flavor of ransomware you're dealing with. Often there's a decryption key available. So instead of rushing off to your forensics people or seeking to negotiate too quickly, you can, you might have a decryption key available, and the No More Ransomware website and others are very good sources of information for that. If you are unlucky and there's no decryption key available, then looking to your backups, and again, Scott's mentioned the importance of backups right the way through the presentation, and understanding what you've effectively got at risk and what you can restore from if you can. keep an eye on your backups to ensure your licensing's up to date. A lot of attacks will also impact your backups as well. So don't make the sort of the schoolboy error of not paying licensing fees for backups and making sure that they're in place and that they're running efficiently. A lot of clients, want to lock down and hunker down and deal with the ransom incident when it occurs. We say the opposite. So be very upfront, be upfront and honest and transparent with your clients, with your stakeholders. Don't shut the conversation down. It's not that you'll necessarily know all the answers or what's actually occurring at the time, but make sure that you are communicating with your stakeholders and letting them know that there's been an issue and that you're investigating. Cyber insurance, again, it's been mentioned a few times. I have to say I'm not a huge fan at times of cyber insurers, because they're a bit slow coming out of London. A lot of the brokers and underwriters come out of London, so some of the Australian insurance outfits are taking 48, 72 hours, even longer, and a lot of damage can be done in that time. So our advice is to retain someone for a lot more quickly than that. Get someone on, pull in the favours that you have with your incident response plan. Get a forensics expert in there. Retain a lawyer who actually does the work in this area, and also have, again, relying on those playbooks that you may have already put in place in terms of communications, be able to pull them out and communicate with stakeholders. The one question around paying ransom or not paying ransom, there was a fairly firm view up until recently that under no circumstances should you pay a ransom, and there's obviously good reasons for not paying a ransom. I don't think it's as clear cut as that these days, and I think in terms of any strategy as an organisation, you need to decide where you sit in terms of that risk. There are organisations, particularly in the US, that we work with that will negotiate on your behalf and help you to negotiate an outcome. Again, as Scott mentioned, the reality is sometimes that outcome won't be great, and other times it will be fine. I think that the other point I'd leave people with is you can expect to be hit at some point. So if you take steps to reduce that risk beforehand, you're in a much better place to deal with it when you do in fact have an incident occur.
Yeah, a lot of great advice there, Dudley, and I think it's very relevant. One thing I'll add to that is to tell a story. We had an organisation contact us around 6 weeks ago, and they'd been, unfortunately, the recipient of a crypto attack. They anticipated a ransom coming, and by the time they contacted us, they had an internal IT team, and the internal IT team had really spent the last 4 or 5 days trying to recover them because the files were encrypted. They couldn't work, had significant business disruption. We had done some project work for them previously, and they knew of us as an expert in the field. So the CEO rang me. And interestingly enough, the first thing I said to him is, do you have an incident response plan? And he said, well, no, right? We tell you we do, but we don't. So I said, okay, look, one of the fundamentals in most incident response plans is that if you do have cyber insurance, contact your insurance company as typically one of the first steps. And there's very good reasons for that. One of the main ones I caution people in why is that often you may jeopardize getting paid through your policy if you don't do that. And in this particular instance, luckily enough, the company did have cyber insurance, but it was 6 days in and they hadn't contacted them. So I'd advise them very quickly to hang up. And the beauty in that situation is that the cyber insurance did help them and go through a whole process to help them recover. But they did ask the IT team to stop what they're doing internally and stop the recovery process immediately. So just be aware that part of having an incident response plan is really simplistic. As Dudley said, it can be quite comprehensive. That's good. But at the very least, it can have a very much an impact on, you don't want to do this by the seat of your pants when you're under attack. You want someone designated that's talking to your internal stakeholders, your external stakeholders, your insurance company, your IT team, etc. And everyone on this call, all the MSPs here, we typically have plans, so we can offer you a templated plan to get started with, and it's something we, not only have an incident response plan, but make sure you practice it and put it in and review it every 6 months at the very least. I think it's really good advice. It's going to save you a whole world of headache. And again, if you have this mindset that says, let's be prepared.
It's also very important to record the timeline for the insurance company. They want to know what happened, when it happened. We've gone through quite a few of these, and they are looking for specific times where they've clicked malicious links. So it's very important that as part of that plan, it is just to record what's going on. So it may not be drop everything and stop everything, but minimum password resets, and then kind of step back and actually record that timeline. And the insurance companies have been very happy with that moving forward for their forensic teams.
Yeah, great advice, Chris. I'm going to come back to you. I have a question around a few, but I think Andrew's posted a question here. Given offsite backups and the sophistication that we're seeing now that Scotty touched on a little bit for these cyber criminals, even if your offsite backups are in place, they can be affected, right? Is there a practice or a strategy to mitigate this? I think I'll tackle that one. In most of the mature MSSPs that are out there, we do things like what we call certainly proof of life. And that proof of life is really ensuring that you're mounting and testing those backups to make sure that you can recover for them and avoiding that situation that Scott talked about, right? Which is just assuming that I've got a backup and I can recover. Being aware of your data retention periods, as Scott talked about it. How long do I keep my data for? We had a client recently we inherited, and one of the first things that we pointed out is that your data retention period that we've inherited from a previous MSP is 60 days. How does that sit with the business? Is the business aware of that? What would happen if your data is overwritten and in 60 days you can't go back 90, 120, etc.? So Andrew, I think, and for my learned colleagues, please feel free to chime in here, but effectively it's having a backup process and solution that offers what I would term as proof of life, Andrew. So mounting them, ensuring that you can recover effectively and not just accepting that a backup is being done and that you can recover from it.
And I suppose that comes back to your offline backups as well, so that you do have an archive of something that's older that you can go back to where it's potentially not inclusive of that malware that you were talking about.
Yeah, and the world's changing. The technology is helping us in some of these endeavors, right? So there is a range of tools. For instance, we use a particular backup solution that offer what they call infinite cloud retention. So that simply means that you can store an infinite amount of data for an infinite amount of time within their cloud environment, which gives us some comfort to know that you're not paying additional extras for that, because that was typically could have been seen as expensive. So yeah, great advice, Chris. Andrew, are you still on the call? Does that answer your question? Do you want to keep unpacking that a little more?
So yeah, no, I'm still here. We do something similar. We do test restores and we have offsite backups, but how do you know if your offsite backups are or aren't infected? Just by doing a restore may not signal that.
I mean, I suppose the question is going to come back to how you found I suppose you're infected, and from then on checking those or restoring the same file and checking for that malware again. So I mean, if you found it more recently, yeah, we're surely bringing that back. You should be able to have something that can remove the malware as well. So it just depends on the product as well and what the malware strain is.
Yeah, I mean, that's only if you know you're infected.
Yes. Which again comes down, I suppose, coming down to the right tools, right? So having, I suppose everybody on the call knows that antivirus is not the be all and end all anymore. We need something that's a bit more heuristic. It looks over the entire user perspective and their hive and how they work in that space. And obviously, antivirus signatures are not, they don't cover 0 day, and that's what we're looking for, those 0 day problems.
All right.
I think Andrew also, Chris touched on it a little bit there. There is different types of backups. There is some out there now that do fundamental malware scans as backupmen will identify known strains. Scotty and I use a product called Datto as one of the many tools in our arsenal that is a fundamental tool that will help identify that. But it is really ensuring that you have a string of backups that are not that you can recover back to a point in time. And I think Scotty, unless you want to add to this, I don't think there is a magic wand that you can wave, Andrew, unfortunately.
Yeah.
As much as we all want that for us,
Yep.
but I don't think there is. As long as you can keep recovering back to a point in time, and you have some fundamental malware scanning that the backup is smart enough to know that, hold on, I've got an infection, combined with the other anomalous events that if you're scanning within your environment, tip you off that you've got a problem as soon as possible. Because the key piece is always don't be one of those statistics that found out 207 days later.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, Adam, some backup technologies have that actual capability built into them. So Datto actually has that. It's actually got some algorithms that run in the background that can actually see if there's ransomware coming into those backups, and it has smarts to get around that. But also, when you're having an offsite backup, depending on what technology you're using, I know the one that we use to actually access our offsite backup, we have a master password and we have MFA as well. So it's completely separate to our production data. So and it's a different provider to our on-site backup backup solution as well. So we're actually using two providers for all our backup solutions, one off-site, one on-site. So having that there in a secure data center, and again, coming down to what I was saying before, again, that's a third party for us. So we need to work with that third party and understand what governance they have, what compliance, are they doing their yearly penetration tests, and are they publishing that information back to us so that we can feel comfortable that that information is there, that's safe and secure. Like Adam said, you have your archive points in there. All in all, if there's important data and it's been encrypted, you should know about it pretty quickly if it's very important data for you, and that would raise the red flag straight away.
Thank you.
Often, one last thing, as I said, Andrew, to that is that a really good cyber platform will often scan for numerous what we call anomalous events. So it's looking at an ability to say what's happening concurrently, smart enough to tie it together and give you that trigger. Because one of the things, as I said, we want to educate all our clients in the market to say you need to invest in this space so that you get an early warning detection system. I'm not technical. So often I have a way of just presenting it, and that's really how I would put it, is make sure that you've got an investment that allows you to know as quickly as you can, again, to go back to that, recover in a controlled and predictable manner. So, but, it brings me to our next point, which how much do you spend, right? So most, the businesses that we're talking about are SMBs, and, we don't always have an infinite budget. So, how much would it cost to put a basic security package for a small business together, right? That's an interesting topic, right? That is an interesting topic. It really comes down to my advice on that is that most MSPs in the MSSP space that specialize now bundle in the basic functionality that is required to give you the minimum protections that are aligned to Essential 8. And they'll bundle that with your patching and your IT support and your user support and your infrastructure support and they'll bundle it all together. They'll invest in a set of tools that do all those things that give you some comfort about aligning to those government recommendations, and package it up as a per user cost per month. And we would like to think it's money well spent. I can assure you that any MSP that's ever worked with that's gone through a breach that chose not to do some of those things previously, funnily enough, as you can appreciate, post-event, wishes they could wind the clock back and say that, there is certain things that I could have done. There are a lot of things that you can do that don't have to be expensive. Scotty talked about a monitoring service for dark web. We have a service called the Business Email Compromise Solution that is a couple of $100 per domain per month as a standalone service to give you an early warning detection on possible email compromise and possible dark web breach, etc. So it doesn't have to always be a lot of money. Investing in a good security awareness training program, again, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. They're fundamental things that you can start to do today that will have a monumental impact on your maturity and your ability to recover. So, go and have those conversations. Go and have those conversations internally. The very first thing that we want everyone to take away, get a gap analysis done. Don't rely on your IT teams. Don't rely on your MSP. Get a gap analysis done to clearly identify where the gaps are. and then ask 2 questions. Is it, go down the list. Is it acceptable risk or is it unacceptable risk? It's acceptable, cool. If it's unacceptable, how do we make it, how do we mitigate that risk? It's just getting started, and unfortunately, because we all lead busy lives, and there's a lot of C-level executives and board members on here, there's no one that can start that other than the board and the owners and the C-level executives, and start to take ownership. It's not an IT problem. It is not an IT problem. It's a business risk, and it needs to be managed accordingly. One of the things I typically see out in the market too is that, you know, there's great emphasis going on internal IT, but I've got an IT team that have got me covered. But unfortunately, what we're finding is that the sophistication that's coming into this market from the criminals, I mean, we're talking about a $7 trillion industry globally from cyber criminals, and that's their budget, $7 trillion. And most of us don't empower our IT teams with a $7 trillion budget. What does that mean? It means they don't have the budget, the tools, the skill set, and the time to really provide that protection that a lot of us as board members and owners feel that we should have. It's unfair to put that on them. That's my thoughts and experience. So I'm pretty blown away that we still have 33 people on this conversation. So there's something of interest here. I am conscious of my colleagues though, and we probably need to start wrapping this up shortly. But is there any other final questions from anyone that's on here that you may want us to tackle? It's a lot to take in, right? So if anyone is sort of thinking through any final questions, I think what I might do is move to wrap the session up. We are well over 30 minutes over, so I think it's hopefully been thought-provoking for you today. As I said, we will make the recordings available to everyone that registered, and I'm sure one of the partners that you registered through the Security Collective will reach out to get some thoughts around what sort of assistance you may or may not need. Please start to think about a gap analysis. Please take a couple of key points out of this today. Make sure that you can recover in a controlled and predictable manner. And if you don't know if that's possible today, go and find out. Be wary of insurance. Everyone in this panel, none of us get any money as an MSP in advocating or not for insurance, and cyber insurance particularly. For those that don't know, there is specific cyber insurance. It's outside of your normal liability insurance, etc., or general insurance. Even though we have some concerns about it, you heard from Dudley on that front. We could talk about insurance all day. Go and get it. Go and look into it. It is still absolutely something we would recommend, but check your policies, get advice, make sure. One of the things that we're seeing in the insurance space is that most organizations just tick the boxes. The next time you have to review or renew your policy, you'll see changes from the insurance company. They're now starting to put some smarts in there to say, are you doing the basics? And guess what? Some of those basics are what Scott talked about today. Are you doing SAP training? Do you have MFA in place? You know, a whole bunch of, fundamentals that if you tick that box, and then when you come time to claim and you can't prove that you're doing those things, those fundamentals that we spoke about today around Essential 8, they're going to look to deny your claim under gross negligence. And that's a horrible situation to be in your time of need. So please be aware, go and look at your insurance policies again. Be comfortable that the policy is delivering what you need it to do. I want to thank everyone for joining, particularly Scott. Great presentation. Thanks again to Chris, Jody, and Dudley for all your participation. It's been wonderful. And thank you all. Have a good day.
Thanks for attending, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
You.